इस तरह के तमाम जो इश्यूज हैं वो शहरों में बढ़े हैं, जिससे कि शहर में रहने वालों की जिंदगी मुश्किल हुई है। और साथ साथ ये भी प्रेजेंटेशन में बताया गया कि शहरों में जो खेती हो रही है, जो अभी हो रही है, वो भी हम उसे देख नहीं पाते हैं, तो उसकी भी एक प्रेजेंटेशन कल दी गई। तो जब हमने ये स्टैब्लिश कर लिया है कल कि बहुत सारे शहरीकरण की समस्याओं से निजात पाने के लिए अर्बन एग्रीकल्चर एक तरीका हो सकता है कि हम अर्बन एग्रीकल्चर को शहरों में बढ़ावा दें। हमने देखा कि बहुत सारे लोग जिनके पास स्पेस होता है शहरों में, वो अभी भी शौकिया तौर पर कुछ बागवानी वगैरह अपनी बालकनी में, अपने रूफ टॉप पे या नीचे यदि उनके पास कोई लॉन जैसी जगह है वहां करते हैं। और इसके अलावा बहुत सारे परंपरागत किसान भी खेती बाड़ी कर रहे हैं। लेकिन हमारे सामने दो तीन इश्यूज हैं जिस पर हमको लगता है कि अब आगे बढ़ना पड़ेगा। पहली बात तो ये है कि इस कॉन्सेप्ट को स्टैब्लिश करना शहरों में कि शहरी खेती बेहतर शहरी जीवन के लिए क्यों जरूरी है, ये हर आदमी की समझ में ये बात डालने की जरूरत है। तो हम चाहते हैं कि इस प्रेजेंटेशन में या आगे आने वाले जो 4 दिन और हैं उनमें भी इन सब बातों पर फोकस किया जाए। दूसरी बात, हम ये चाहेंगे कि ये जो शौकिया खेती है शहरों में, उससे निकल करके ये लोगों को ये महसूस हो कि ये खेती उन्हें अपने सस्टेनेंस के लिए, अपनी जरूरतों को पूरी करने के लिए करनी है, ये सिर्फ शौक का विषय नहीं है। और एक टिकाऊ शहरी जीवन के लिए, सस्टेनेबल अर्बन लाइफ के लिए भी खेती को अपनाना बहुत जरूरी है। तो ये कुछ इस तरह के इश्यूज हैं। मुझे लगता है कि शहरों में एक बहुत बड़ा इशू रहता है कि लोग सनलाइट को एक्सपोज नहीं होते हैं, फिजिकल एक्टिविटी कम होती है, ट्रैवलिंग के अलावा ज्यादातर काम ऑफिसेज में होते हैं, खास करके मजदूरों का वर्क को छोड़ दें तो वैसी स्थिति में उनके लिए ये बहुत सारे हेल्थ इश्यूज को भी एड्रेस करता है, यदि हम अपने घर में थोड़ा बहुत भी खेती कर सकते हैं तो इन इश्यूज पर हम लोग को बात करनी है। आज के इस सेकेंड डे पर हमारे साथ 3 पैनलिस्ट हैं। मैं उनको उनको आपसे परिचित कराता हूं। द फर्स्ट पैनलिस्ट टुडे इज डॉक्टर लक्ष्मी उन्नीथन। Dr. Lakshmi Unnithan is currently the editor and head PR and communication at Agriculture World Magazine at Krishi Jagran Publication, New Delhi. She was earlier associated with Simphet, an agricultural organization from Sikkim, and she will be speaking on transforming urban food systems. The second speaker that we have on the panel is Mr. Kapil Mandwewala. He is at present settled in Delhi. He has founded Edible Roots in 2012 with the aim to help people to grow their own food through workshops on urban organic farming, by setting up good food gardens and edible landscapes and building community farms where people can grow their own food through subscribing to a mini farm. Kapil will be speaking on finding roots in concrete spaces. And the third speaker that we have today is Manasa Kambanna. She is an independent journalist and researcher based in Bangalore. She covers education, theatre and dance for The Hindu. She has a bachelor's in law and master's in public policy. Her core research interest revolves around food and farming. And Manasa will be speaking on urban agriculture, its scope and limits, the case of Bangalore. So, my dear friends, I present all these 3 panelists, and the first panelist to speak will be Dr. Lakshmi Unnithan. Over to Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Lakshmi, you can go ahead.
Okay, sir. Good evening, all of you. I'm Dr. Lakshmi here, the editor of Agriculture World. I'm looking forward to share some thoughts on transformation systems in urban settings. I thank the organizers for the opportunity, and I hope all of you are keeping yourself safe at the time of Corona. Farming in the City 2020 is quite relevant in the times of Corona, and it gives us an opportunity to fundamentally rethink the way we have organized our food system. I actually think of this crisis COVID-19 as a wake-up call to rebuild our global food systems. As you see here in this presentation, the slide, you can see a city where population is at high density, and these places where population densities are at a peak are hotspots for the spread of epidemics. Here, this urban food supply will also prove challenging given the complexity of different food source areas and formal and informal food systems. And it is also predicted that by 2050, close to 7 billion people are projected to live in urban areas. As you see in this slide, you can see that it's in the year 2007 that the number of people in urban areas overtook the number in, and the latest report by UN on population speculates that by 2050, the Indian urban population will increase by 300 million people. And as you see here, in India, the population of urban is lesser now, but it will tip over, and by 2050, it will be increased by 300 million people. See, in such a kind of issues where the urbanization is high, there are many social issues, including housing problems, climate risks, air pollution, nutrition insecurity, and you cannot forget the current food systems also. In such a kind of situation, they are quite challenged. And the cities, it's imperative that the cities need to explore various opportunities in developing sustainable food systems. In the earlier societies, we were living close to the rivers, and developing food, producing food was not an issue. But in the present society, where the cities have expanded and we have the population is at high, growing at highest density, the stages of the growing food also has now become alien. The food which you consume has also become alien to the palate that consumes it. So when you explain the concept of urban agriculture, it's a concept, yes, we always know that urban agriculture cannot feed the cities. The spaces are too less, the potential yields are too low, and we also remain restricted to certain types of food. And also, you know that the investment in urban agriculture in Asia, the funding patterns are conducive. They are left unattended. They are increasingly depending on imported foods. But although all these things keeping into consideration, it also makes we also need to rekindle the bonds between the urban and the natural worlds, so that at least 30% of our nutrition needs come from the urban. Yes, we know yesterday we were talking about informal sectors in Indian cities, the markets, the urban markets. We know that they are often ignored and they are unusual. They have no focus is being given to them, and there is no act of formalizing happening in them. But there is a need for planning and designing for these urban zones. These zones need to be included, and the current trend should be to bring food production closer to the consumers. There are many multidisciplinary initiatives happening all around the world. There are many initiatives taken by FAO. The Millennium Urban Food Policy Pact is one where 209 cities have joined. RUAF City Food Network is one among the best. The Agenda 2030, where the Paris Agreement recognizes the resilient and the sustainable urban development, they also say it as a crucial to the quality of the life of our people. As you see, there are many cities that are committed to the global action of urban. Urban farming is not a new concept. It has been there since the 1600s or much before that. But here, as you see, this is a scene from France, where you see the crops are grown surrounded by massive fruit walls. Here you can see the fruit walls. The fruit crops are grown around the walls, and the crops are grown in between them, so that they create a microclimate that could increase the temperature by more than 10 degrees Celsius. Very interesting concept. This concept called chinampas is being invented by the Aztec civilization, and they are referred to as floating gardens. These are artificial gardens that are created by interweaving reeds beneath the lake surface. See, these have been concepts that have been there, but then we have just moved away from all these concepts. This is the Havana model, the Cuba model, where it's been recognized as an urban agriculture movement. It happened in Cuba because of their increasing prices, the demand for food and fuel after the World War, and then now, as you see, they have come across. We come across to them as the food produced by them. 90% of requirements is met by the urban agriculture, which has been there in Cuba. See, these are the common places, the parks, the gardens, everywhere they have started growing food. See the food, the houses everywhere in common areas, and then they sell it at the farm gate only. In when the IFPRI says that the urban agriculture produce only 15% of the food consumed in urban areas worldwide, but in contrast, Havana shows us that 90% of produce comes from the local growing. There are many assistance which many of the countries have assistance from FAOs. The Latin American cities are assisted by FAO. There are successful urban and peri-urban agriculture happening in Hanoi, Shanghai, densely populated Hong Kong, and in many countries like Japan, Netherlands, as also in developing nations in Latin America. The urban farmers are given government protection and encouragement through favorable land use regulations, tax concession, and other support measures. That's quite a welcoming step. Here, as you see, Bangkok's Thammasat University is one of the oldest in Thailand. It has a new claim to fame, the Asia's largest urban rooftop farming. This is a 7,000 square meter space where they have mimicked the rice terraces, and they have built it on top of it's a rooftop garden. And Bangkok is a place where they are hit hardest by the extreme weather conditions, so this becomes an ideal setting. Many effective, hyper-productive indoor vertical farming, even in India, you can see many of them coming up. And Farm 1 is in Manhattan, and deep beneath the South Korean mountain also you can see a high-tech farm that has been built inside an abandoned tunnel. This is an interesting concept by Aquapark, where it's a recent waterborne venture, 4 acres of horizontal growing area in a scale otherwise unattainable in New York. This is also a unique opportunity for farm operators to grow food in such close proximity to the largest food distribution centers in the world. This is a Milan-based architecture firm which has laid out plans for a smart forest city located near Cancun. It's got everything. It's self-sustained. It includes water, food, and power needs, and the city will be spaced out over 557 hectares. Green roofs are very popular in France, in Colorado, in Australia, Germany, everywhere. They have made laws which have forced them to have either solar panels or either rooftop gardens, partially covered in plants, etc., which can be ventured. Now that we have seen many ventures which has happened globally, in India also there are many urban ventures which have been started very early itself. In 1980s in Pune, Srimati Lata Srikhande, who started urban agriculture, to R.T. Doshi, to Dabholkar, and many formal and informal terrace gardening groups, especially the Bangalore Terrace Gardening Group, the Uta from Tota in Bangalore, and some small farms wherein people have collaborated to buy a space of land called Farm 8, for example, Farm 8, 3 acres of land in Delhi, where they have started a permaculture space, and something like Village Story, where they have leased land for an experimental square foot community. So Good is an organization which works for the children, and they have successfully ventured into urban agriculture in the Delhi schools. So this is a picture from the Bangalore Terrace Gardening Group, where they're successfully growing lauki. And this is Village Story, Anamika, having microgreens and at her experimental farm. This is Farm 8, a space in Delhi. And as you look at all the states in India, I think Kerala has got the maximum number of rooftop gardens because of their good policies which they have enforced there. And I think almost many organizations, many government departments are there which are just promoting the urban rooftop gardening, even though it is aquaponics, drip irrigation systems, or hydroponics, like the state agriculture departments, the Kerala Horticulture Mission, the Department of Environment and Climate Change, the Vegetable Fruit Promotion Councils. All of them are giving at a very subsidized rate all the grow bags which you can see here in this picture. The grow bags with the fertilizers, with the plants, with the seeds, and the caretaking also has been taken by them. And so that has resulted in around 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs rooftop gardens in Kerala. So you can see an aquaponic setup done. And here you can see most of the schools in Kerala, government schools in Kerala and private, they have got their backyard gardens. This is a kind of garden which they have, which got nutritious amaranthus and rice and bananas. See, as you look at creating sustainability in cities, there are many essentials which you need to think of. it is depending on the better innovations. You have to think each city is different, each region food system is different. So you have to think upon a notion that there needs to be an urban planning and a design that needs to be revisited in each city, and better innovations in how food production can be reimagined. It should be an integral part of city living. Now the main thing is we are not thinking about food. We are only thinking about food which is available in the supermarket. So it has to be an integral part of the city living. And yes, we need to have certain designs and urban plans in mind when you are thinking of a city. You have to have some certain areas look for the growing and to ensure a resilient urban future. Something called city region food systems, they are there. RUAF organization has set out some rules, some practical guidelines. What they emphasize is, yes, you need to have a political will, the use of available policy and planning instruments. You need to have the infrastructure and the logistics, the public procurement, license, and the land use planning. Yes, this should come from the government itself. Each city region should be differently treated, and they should have
We lost Lakshmi.
Dr. Lakshmi?
We are not able to hear you.
Yeah, I'm also not able to hear her. So maybe she can continue later, and we'll ask our next panelist, Kapil, to start his presentation, because otherwise we'll be running short of time later on. So is Kapil there? And
I'm here. Can you hear me? Okay?
Yes, please take over. Please take over with your presentation.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, you are audible. Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to share the screen, but I think it will not allow me until Lakshmi's screen is taken off. But that's okay. I can start talking meanwhile until she comes back.
Nishant can do it.
Nishant can do it. Nishant, can you help me put my screen up on the webinar?
Yep. I'm just trying. Kapil, can you try now?
Sure, just a moment.
No.
Can somebody get in touch with Dr. Lakshmi through WhatsApp or whatever means?
It still doesn't allow me. Nishant, I can't still do it.
Nishant, I think you have to go back to the basic screen only, then he'll be able to share.
Okay, now I can.
Yes.
So I'm going to start by just introducing myself quickly. My name is Kapil. I am the founder of a company called Edible Roots. We are based in Delhi for the last 5 years, and we enable people to grow food in urban spaces and live sustainably. What I would like to do is I would like to start by showing a quick video. So I'm just going to take that screen live. In case the audio is not audible, I'm going to share the link for this video, which is on YouTube, in the chat. So I'm just going to play it right now.
Is getting a lot more polluted and just going.
I think more and more people are aware of food that's coming out and all of the chemicals and just how poisonous the world has become.
Because we don't know how these come to our supermarkets, because it's fancily labeled and you get discounts on them and it's packaged well, it looks great. So you feel that, okay, it's so easily, readily available, just like another chips packet.
It boils down to 3 questions about our food. Who is growing it?
where it's being grown and how it's being grown. As we have moved to more urban spaces and away from the land where the food was growing, what's happened is that we have lost answer to these three questions. The chemicals, the pesticides, the adulteration, the malpractices, all of that will go away. These things have seeped into our food system. It's because somewhere this connection was lost. These answers were lost.
When I started growing vegetables, I realized how that one tomato which I've grown is so precious. There's an instant connection with the food that you get. Also, way less fertilizers and chemicals going into your body. Naturally, your terrace garden will only give you those vegetables which are meant to be grown in that season. So you're not eating anything that you're not supposed to eat.
Otherwise, you might go by your entire day without even being aware of the surroundings. Like what the temperature was today, or how much rainfall or how much light fell. But the moment you start growing this one plant, what will happen is that the plant will start communicating. Assuming you're taking care of the plant, spending 5-10 minutes a day with the plant will start telling you, today it was too hot for me, give me some more water. Or this is too hot for me, there's too much light, give me some sort of a shade protection.
To me, urban farming it's just a very simple way that people can start to reconnect with their own food source, begin to understand, in just a very practical way. Okay, food actually comes from somewhere, and I can be a part of that process.
Plants take in more carbon dioxide and release more oxygen, but also the fact that they will keep your roofs cooler, your houses cooler, so you need less air conditioning, and accordingly the impact on the environment is lesser. They also need to be fed, and especially from organic nutrients. If we were just to start composting our own home waste and start utilizing it to grow our own pots, that means that we're making a difference of 5,000 tons on a daily basis in terms of the waste that we're dumping onto our spaces in our city. From my understanding, if we use all the spaces on rooftops that are currently not utilized, it will be enough to not only feed the people of Delhi with all the fresh veggies, but also surrounding villages.
To me, it seems like the food-related element is kind of the missing foundation that a lot of people who are thinking about asset-based community development, helping poor communities to help each other and help them to recognize the value and the things that they do already have in their community.
The fact that the food is closer to you, you have an impact in terms of less fossil fuels, less carbon footprint, and also
the less miles that your food travels, the better it is for your body. And when you're growing your own vegetables, you know that your food hasn't traveled a lot when it reaches you.
But if we can plant more gardens and know what's coming and what we're eating and what we're consuming, we can really give to the world. It can help yourself, your friends, everything, the world, animals, just everything.
Yes, she's using it.
I'm just going to switch to the presentation. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to continue. What this video showed was a lot of the pictures about the work that Edible Roots has done over the last few years through means of workshops, through means of helping people to enable their own gardens in their rooftops, balconies, or a backyard, or any space where you get sunlight. It could be a small piece of land or large piece of land around your house, around your neighborhood, around your city. So I would we have already discussed quite a bit about what urban agriculture is, but in very simple terms, it means where you can grow food in any urban space where you live. It could be an office, it could be work, it could be your community, it could be your neighborhood, it could be a park, it could be any space, it could be a school. And the idea is to use these spaces to grow food, not just as a learning tool, but also to actually meet some of the food needs of the city. As Lakshmi had mentioned earlier, examples of other countries like Cuba and all, which have become to quite an extent self-sufficient in their food requirements just by growing within the city limits. From my understanding, the amount of space that we have in rooftops and balconies and vacant spaces and plots lying around in Delhi, if we start growing, not only can we grow enough food, fresh vegetables and fruits for Delhi people, but also for surrounding cities and villages. That's how much space that we have that is not being utilized right now. So why urban agriculture? Again, a few reasons were mentioned in the video, but there are a few important ones that I would like to mention again here. The first is about understanding that what has happened over the last 60, 70 years. What has happened is that our food has gone farther away from us as we have started living more in the cities.
पिछले कई दशकों में शहर में रहने के कारण हमारा भोजन हमसे काफी दूर होता गया है। एवरेज डिस्टेंस भोजन आने और हमारे बीच में करीब 800 किलोमीटर है। हमें 3 सवाल पूछना चाहिए, कौन उसे उगा रहा है, कहाँ और कैसे।
It is because as a consumer, as a person who is putting something inside their mouth, does not know the 3 answers: who is growing it, where and how, about the food that we are eating. What the act of urban farming does is it starts connecting you back, because for that one pot or for that one kiari that you might grow, for those you start knowing the answers, and that begins a journey, internal journey, to find out answers for everything else that we eat. We have so many people who have learned through our workshops and done the gardens, and who come back and tell us that once they start doing their own kitchen gardens, they want to sort of try to meet as much as their requirements by either growing yourself or knowing a farmer who can supply directly to them, because there is a difference to the food grown by ourselves and the food that for which we know the answers to the 3 questions. There's a joy to it, there's a connection to it, there's a bond to it. So this is the fundamental reason about connecting with our food. It also addresses many other issues around urban food security, about converting garbage to compost. Once we also realize that the biggest challenge that as a city that we are facing is how we manage our waste. There's also a saying in the Greek times that the measure of a advancement of a civilization can be measured by how well they manage their waste. And from what I understand, Delhi produces about 8,000 metric tons of waste on a daily basis, of which about 60% is compostable. Which हमारा छिलके खाना जो waste होता है, जो भी घास फूस निकलता है, पत्ते गिरते हैं, all these kinds of waste are adding up to about 5,000 metric tons on a daily basis. अगर हम अपना खुद का खाना उगाएंगे तो हमको खाद भी चाहिएगा उसके लिए, और उसके लिए हम अपने खुद के घर का जो किचन का जो वेस्ट निकल रहा है उसका खाद बना के हम we can use it in our own garden. And this completes a loop. Nature में हर चीज is in a cyclical nature, is in a cyclical loop. One thing feeds into the other. तो जो हमारा घर का वेस्ट का कंपोस्ट होगा, that can go into our own garden. When we eat from our garden, that garden का waste can again go back into the compost. इसके अलावा और भी फायदे हैं. It cleans the air. We can also have some air purifying plants inside the house, but more importantly, we can have a better humid environment around the house, cleaner air because of the plants. The trees, if you have fruit trees, the trees can also act as a barrier for pollution to come inside your house. And lastly, especially in times like what we're going through right now as a pandemic, it can really be a source of an activity, a meditation, a joy that you can do while you are at your home. And nothing else will make you more self-sufficient and self-fulfilled as having a garden. The garden gives you a sense of security that at least your food needs are taken care of, even though it may not be all of it, but even a small garden, a food garden, can give you a sense of security that will go a long way in uncertain times like a pandemic. Next, I'm going to show you a few photographs of the different kinds of gardens that we have made in Delhi and around in various designs and by using various kinds of materials. These are farms. As we know, around Delhi, but also around many other cities in India and around the world, there's a lot of land that's lying idle. What's happened over the last 10, 20 years is that a lot of the farming families have sent their next generation, the younger generation, to cities in search of jobs, because they do not see farming as a viable activity, as a financially viable activity for their family. So because of which, what has resulted is that a lot of land is lying idle. And there are people who have the skill because they come from a farming family, but they are doing other jobs. So if we can create a model by growing in these empty spaces around our cities, then not only the people can get employment, but the land can be utilized, the water can be conserved, and food can be provided to the people living on the farm and in the city. This is an example of two farms that we have around Delhi. One is in Bijwasan and one is near Sona. These are more like backyard gardens. People who have some space in their backyard or their front yard or some space around the house where they get sunlight. So again, different kinds of beds are made to grow various kinds of plants. Urban situation also creates unique challenges like peacocks, monkeys, birds, squirrels. So the photograph that you see on the right with the hoops is used to create a net. A net is put on top of that to protect the plants from the various birds that might damage the plants. The same structure can also be used to put a shade net during the very hot season to protect the plants from extreme heat. Again, a few more gardens in the backyard and on the front yards. We use these are bricks, but they're non-cemented. There's no cement used in it. They're just stacked. And again, as you can see, various kind of crops are grown. Also, what is important to notice is the way these gardens are designed. When we design gardens in urban space, I think this is where one of the key skills that we bring in as an organization is when we design gardens, we design them in a way where the space is optimally utilized. At the same time, it has to be accessible. A typical farm, if you see in the rural India, is designed in a very different way. There are rows of crops in the middle of which people walk, the farmers walk and then do the farm work. But when we are doing design of an urban garden, the space has to be thought in a very different way. Because we do not want to walk on the soil that we are growing in, because we use a potting mixture which has to be kept soft and friable, and it cannot be made compact. So again, please notice how the gardens are designed, because that's a very crucial element when you grow in smaller spaces and confined spaces, so that you can make the maximum out of that space. The other thing to notice is how the plants are grown. So it's not necessary to grow one plant in one space, as typically we do on a farm. In an urban garden, you can also do something called mixed planting or companion planting or intercropping, which allows you to grow multiple plants in the same space, reducing your risk and increasing your output, and also creating many other synergies between the plants. One can give nutrients, one can take nutrients, one can deter the pests. So a very diverse kind of garden can be created, which is also helpful to meet the diverse requirement of a family. A family does not want just spinach or just cauliflower or just carrots. They want a mix of things. So if you plan and design a garden well, you can also grow a mix of crops, which is good for the soil, which is good to reduce the risk, and also good in terms of what you get out of the garden for your family. The next few pictures are on the terraces, on rooftops. Again, in Delhi and many parts of the country, we have extremely hot weather. So as you can see in the top left, we use this net. It's a shade net of 50% density, which allows only the right amount of light for the plants to get, and giving them the right conditions by reducing the temperatures and increasing the humidity. On the rooftops, we use various kinds of materials that are unique to growing on a rooftop. Like having a drain tray. You can't see it in this picture, but it's underneath this, which protects the roof from having any leakages or seepage into your house. Also, it allows the rainwater to drain very easily. If by mistake, if you water your garden excessively, it will also drain out the excess water. And also the second thing that we really recommend using on a rooftop garden is using a good potting mixture. A good potting mixture is a mixture of various ingredients like coco peat, compost, soil, sand, neem khali, gypsum. All these mixtures, when you put together in a certain ratio, it creates a very good environment, a soft soil, a loose soil for the plants to grow in. Again, a few more designs. In this case, we have used bamboo. we have tried to use as much as possible renewable materials, ecological materials. Initially, we used to do using fiber sheets and plastic, but gradually we have moved away. If ever we use a plastic container, it's usually a recycled container, so that no new plastic is being generated. The other thing you want to notice is the different kinds of plants you can grow. In one of the pictures you can see on the right, you can see tomatoes are growing. On the left one, which is a garden of about 200 square feet, you can see cabbage, various greens like dhania, palak. In the farther distance, you can see lettuces of red color, green color, and a few other plants. There's radish and there's carrots as well. This is an example of using recycled containers, where if you have a container like a water bucket or a water tank that can be recycled by filling up soil. So that in that case, it's okay to use a plastic container. On the top right, you see a crate. These are typical crates that are used in the sabzi mandis or for carrying milk packets. And these crates can be easily used by putting a lining inside and putting a potting mixture inside to grow things. This is also a very economical way to start the garden. The other photographs I showed earlier can have a certain amount of cost to it, but using a recycled container can be very economical and inexpensive, and anybody can start doing the garden.
Sorry for interrupting, Kapil. The time is getting.
Okay, I'll take 5 more minutes. Only 5 more minutes. Okay, and then the bottom right is the bamboo baskets. Again, various examples of recycled containers. The last thing that I want to talk about is spaces that we call them as farmlets. Farmlets are basically mini farms we have created in and around the city. So as of now, we have 3 farms around Delhi NCR, totaling about 30 acres. The idea is to create small plots of land about 1200 square feet, which is enough for a family of 4 to grow their fresh vegetables. And then on these plots of land, people come and engage in the growing process. Of course, we help them, and our farm staff also helps in growing it. And then they can pick it up or they can get it delivered. So these are various ideas and then a lot of countries like Cuba was discussed earlier. Other countries like UK and Germany have a system called allotments and client farms, where you can grow foods in spaces allotted for your family. Specifically, in their case, it's done by the government. In our case, it's not. There's no policy as such like that. But as an organization, we are doing it. The main benefit of doing the farmlets and kitchen gardens is that by doing this, about 70, 80, 90% of your family's fresh vegetable requirements can easily be met, where you know the fundamental questions about the food: who is growing it, where is it being grown, and how is it being grown. This is our contact information. If anybody wants to reach out to us, you can email us or call us. Thank you.
Have you finished?
Yes, I have.
Thank you, Kapil. आपने बहुत ही स्पष्ट तरीके से अर्बन एग्रीकल्चर की जरूरत को स्टैब्लिश किया है. Thank you very much for your presentation. I wish we could have heard more from you, but I move on to the third speaker, and that is Manasa Kampanna, and I request Manasa to please start her presentation. Manasa?
Okay, sir. I will.
Yes. Please try to conclude within 10 minutes.
Sure, sir.
Sorry for interruption, Manasa. There is a request to keep the audio levels a bit higher. So if you can speak, a bit loudly.
Yeah, I think I'm audible. Is it fine?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'll move on. So my topic for today is, as already mentioned by Basantji, it's the scope and limits of urban agriculture. And to do this, I've taken Bangalore as a case study. In other words, the question can be, what actually makes urban agriculture to become truly life enriching for the city? And I do this by analyzing urban farms that exist currently in Bangalore. You already know the journey of Bangalore city, and Lakshmi has already gone in detail into urbanization generally around the world. Bangalore has its name, that is Garden City, but slowly it's becoming garbage city like any other city of the country, as you already know. To just give you some figures, We have lost thousands of lakes, agricultural fields that was part of the city before. Currently, the Bangalore population is around 1.2 crores, and the amount of waste that generates on a daily basis is around 6,000 metric tons. So to address these kind of ecological and food problems that the city is facing currently, a number of initiatives came up in the last 20 years. I'll be discussing various kinds of urban agriculture that's being carried out in Bangalore, not just based on the place the plants are grown, but also the methods and techniques that are used. And composting forms the basis for all these types of agriculture. Composting was spearheaded by a person called Vani Murthy from Malleshwaram. And they are obviously with the help of other NGOs in Bangalore. Then terrace farming took up. You can see B.N. Vishwanath's photo on bottom left. He spearheaded the terrace farming movement and is also known as father of urban terrace farming in India. A number of urban small farms emerged in the periphery of the city, including permaculture farms. So to cite some of the farms, there is a Hum of the Earth on Mysore Road. There's Hamsa on the other side of Bangalore near Whitefield, etc. Urban beekeeping also emerged in the last 10 years. A person called Apurva BV from Honeyday Bee Farms has been doing quite well in the city and also around the country. Akshaya Kalpa provides organic milk on a daily basis to its customers in Bangalore. The major attraction now in Bangalore is hydroponics and aquaponics. Hydroponics, as you already know, is soilless agriculture. Aquaponics is a mix of hydroponics and fish culture, and that's getting a lot of popularity in Bangalore, also because soil is not required to grow in this method. And also it looks fresh, more clean to urban residents in Bangalore. There are also high-tech farms, for example, digital farms like Woolly Labs in Bangalore. They are located in Indranagar area. They are not. I'll be dealing with them in detail in the next few slides. There are also big commercial farms like Namdari Fresh and Gopalan Organics in Bangalore that spread across hundreds of acres. They are really large when compared to rooftop gardens. There also emerged a lot of different kinds of facilitators to facilitate these various kinds of farming in Bangalore. They can be garden service providers or co-farming companies. Co-farming, as already Kapil explained in the previous presentation, co-farming companies connect consumers and farmers in the city, and both of them together they can farm on the farmer's land. For example, Farmizen lets around 600 square feet of land for rent to whoever who wish to farm for themselves. There also exist community markets and spaces like Ragi Kana or Village Story, as already Lakshmi mentioned in her slides. A number of organic restaurants are also emerging on a big scale in Bangalore. Concept of UA has been discussed yesterday and today already, but just to mention Jack Smith's definition, he defines urban agriculture as something that is grown in urban and peri-urban region by using and reusing resources, including waste, to produce a diversity of plants that feeds the city. And J.A. Maggiott, 4 years later, added another aspect, a very important aspect to this definition, which is using resources, including human, from the city or at least from around the area. The picture you can see on the right-hand side is from Buffalo Back Collective's farm. You can see the variety of produce that they produce on a weekly basis. Coming to analysis part, The major contribution of urban agriculture in Bangalore is access to fresh food. By fresh food, I mean getting food to the kitchen at least 24 hours after its harvest. This is the major contribution by these farms. By local food, I mean not just food grown in a particular locality, but also plants that are original or native to the region, or at least naturally which accustomed to this region. So local species and varieties also should be included when you call when you define local food. Because consumption and production of food is happening in the same region, there obviously it builds personal relations and social connections, and also entrepreneurship. The major contribution by these urban farms is their contribution to the environment. As Kapil already mentioned, most of them are carrying out waste. They are converting waste into something edibles. They are reducing the temperature of rooftops and buildings to a large extent, and there have been studies on it. Mainly, what conventional agriculture, which was on a linear model, that is, there's input, production, and now output, and there was waste was nowhere figuring in that model. But most of the urban agriculture have taken up cyclic models, which convert waste, which consider waste as a part of their cycle. So they have urban agriculture has completed, I would say, ecological cycle of the nature. And bees in the city are not just increase the yield, but also they are very important to the ecology of the city. So urban beekeeping has contributing a lot to the city. But when it comes to commercial farms, are they really contributing to the environment is the question to be asked, because they exist in large acres of land between 100 to 250 acres. And because not all of them farm in an open land, for example, Gopalan farms, it's around 120 acres, but around 55 acres of its land has tunnels and polyhouses. So the amount of resources that it's consuming in terms of steel, plastic, water, soil, nutrients from the city is huge. Now I come to challenges. There's obviously exist, unlike in Delhi that we saw yesterday, most of the migrant farmers are carrying out agriculture, but in Bangalore it seems mostly elite. The urban farms and stores that exist in Bangalore are mostly in the economically richer areas like Whitefield, Electronic City, Koramangala, Indiranagar, etc. And in some areas there are almost none, except very tiny rooftop gardens. Diversity of crops, many permaculture gardens and rooftop gardens are producing diversity of crops, including wild greens, roots, etc. But when it comes to the aquaponic farms and large commercial farms, they usually grow only a certain variety of crops like lettuce, spinach, maximum tomato, etc. And commercial farms grow hybrid varieties that have large market in foreign countries. In the coming years, when urban farming catches up in Bangalore, there might be conflict between urban and rural, because 90% of vegetables are coming from Kolar, for instance. It's a neighboring district to Bangalore. So this conflict should be addressed, I think, in the coming years. The major challenge that urban agriculture poses in Bangalore is heavy resources used in terms of technology. For example, in Uli Lab kind of a setup, as you can see on the slide, there's aquaponic farm inside and it's covered by a poly house. There are also other technology deployed here. There is growth and temperature sensor, Internet of Things sensor, pH sensor, electric conductivity sensor, etc. And all this data is managed by a central monitor. And on the right hand side, you can see its farm, and below is another large aquaponic commercial farm called Madhavi Farms. The question is, do we require such sophisticated technology to grow spinach and lettuce? Is the question I'm asking. So what is actually the purpose of urban agriculture then? Is it only to produce whatever crops?
Sorry, Mansa, will you please conclude?
Yes, 1 more minute, sir. Is it the ultimate produce that we are aiming for, or some wider outcomes? Andre Vijayan and Catherine Bond, in their paper Urban Agriculture on the Map and Growth and Challenges, explain purpose of urban agriculture is not purely productivity. It has other advantages to the city like social, health, environmental, educational, and local. Further, Noah Zerb, in his paper Moving from Bread, Water to Milk and Honey, explains the purpose of urban agriculture is to re-embed food consumption in social relations. By re-embed, he means to connect food chains and also human relations, which is right now fragmentalized. So where the above mentioned aspects are absent, to understand where it's absent, let me define what is exchange value and use value. Exchange value is something quantifiable, and use value is something which is left to qualitative judgment. And this Nishant Avan observes, as UA becomes more mainstream, it seems to be shifting from exchange value, use value to exchange value. So this has been happening more in commercial farms. So I conclude, and urban farming should ideally mimic nature. It should be mixed, diverse, as Kapil already suggested. It should be local. It should be shared, seasonal, led by the community, and value connections, both human and non-human. And urban farming should not ideally be technologically heavy, monoculture, resource extracting, and catering to foreign market. Thank you. This leads us to the observation that we initially made. Can Bangalore again become a garden city, especially food garden city? Can our Victorian parks be converted into small food forests? I leave you with this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mansa. We have already exceeded our time. And I think Dr. Lakshmi has joined us again. So is there Dr. Lakshmi? Are you there? Dr. Lakshmi?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Will you continue your presentation?
Yes, sir. For 5 minutes, I'll just conclude it.
I think you take still less time. Maybe within 2-3 minutes, try to conclude.
Definitely, sir. I'll just conclude.
Please go ahead.
So as I was telling about the city region food systems, as every city is different and no one size fits all, so each region should develop a variety of strategies, and it would definitely be have a political will and the use of available policy and planning instruments. And here, the collaboration should be between all levels of government and non-governmental organizations. There should be a multi-stakeholder food planning policy councils, which many cities, including Toronto and Belo Horizonte, have successfully implemented. And we should look at how policy at all levels can provide greater support to promote positive. And the best practices, what I have found out in other countries are, there are certain food policy councils and food labs and some similar groups like multi-stakeholder food forums and platforms, food policy networks. And what they do is they research and bring perspectives to shareholders on how to develop good food systems to bring about changes, how to address the challenges and bring about innovative solutions to influence policies and planning in food systems. The best youth food policy food council is one at Toronto, and it is the only youth-led food group. It is very important that you include youth in all these food policy networks, because they are getting alienated from the concepts of food. So it's very important important to work with them, to engage, to inform and mobilize these young children. And how the last is how to design holistic food systems. So all these concepts which I have told should include the city as a perspective. No one size fits everything. There should be a political will. The cities and the regions need to connect better with the farmers also, traditional farmers who are living around the cities. You have to sustain the link, the urban link with the rural, and it is important to keep us weaved to our cultures and indigenous knowledge systems. It's quite difficult at times now, but it is very imperative to have that kind of a weaving the culture and indigenous knowledge systems into our future generation. There should be an integrated perspective that needs to be developed, keeping in mind the above social and ecological dimensions. There are many strategic approaches to be made, and this cannot be done individually. This collective has to have, the communities have to get involved. There should be larger collectives, and it should go from local to global, and these kinds of there should be hundreds of such collectives working in one city, and it should be a holistic food system approach which should be developed in a city. Thank you, sir. Hello.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We are already at 4:10, having exceeded 10 minutes by the stipulated time. I think if we can extend by another 10-15 minutes, we have a few questions which we can take up. Is it okay?
Yes. I think we are going to extend by 10 more minutes. We'll try to take the questions which have come so far. You can type your questions. We will try to answer them over email, or other panelists can answer you privately. But we will take the questions now, and let's extend it by 10 minutes.
So I have a question from Deborah Datta. He has asked, the point regarding carbon dioxide concentration in urban agriculture isn't clear. Possible to elaborate? He has not mentioned to whom the question is addressed. So will any one of the panelists take up this question and be very brief in answering it?
Sir, I think I have discussed it in my presentation that the higher carbon dioxide concentrations in cities might be helpful for the growth of plants, for the lush growth of plants. That is a report which I had read somewhere and I had quoted there.
So I think we can skip further details on it.
Hello, sir.
I think because you have already spoken on this, so we will skip further elaboration and we'll move on to the next question from Rajendra Bhise. ये है, शहरी खेती अगर विकसित होती है तो ग्रामीण क्षेत्र के अर्थव्यवस्था के ऊपर क्या असर होगा? शहरों में पानी ज्यादातर जगह ग्रामीण क्षेत्र से आता है, क्या ग्रामीण क्षेत्र के रिसोर्सेज की अधिक लूट होगी, खासकर पानी की? That is a very important question. Let there be no conflict between the urban and the rural population. So I think Kapil can address this question. Kapil?
हाँ, मैं एड्रेस कर सकता हूँ
जी।
इसमें ऐसा है कि जो हम शहरों में उगाएंगे उसमें पानी की आवश्यकता बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं होती है। अगर हम हमारे घर के अंदर जो पानी इस्तेमाल करते हैं उसकी बराबरी में देखें तो जो पौधे उगाने के लिए पानी चाहिएगा वो बहुत कम होता है उसकी कंपैरिजन की मात्रा में। तो और जहाँ तक किसानों पे इसकी जो आर्थिक व्यवस्था पे असर आने का है, मेरे हिसाब से किसानों के लिए और अच्छा हो जाएगा, क्योंकि ऐसा नहीं है कि हम शहरों में सब कुछ उगा पाएंगे। हमारा अभी भी अनाज, दाल, फल और कई और सब्जियां, आलू, प्याज, कई चीजें ऐसी हैं जो शहरों में हम नहीं उगा पाएंगे कभी भी, तो वो अभी भी किसानों से ही आनी है। तो और लेकिन इससे फायदा ये होगा कि जब आदमी अपना खुद का सब्जी उगाएगा घर अपने शहर में, तो उससे किसान के प्रति उसकी एक रिस्पेक्ट जागती है, जिससे वो जो किसान कर रहा है और किसान का जो अनाज है या दाल है, जो भी उत्पाद है, उसके प्रति एक रिस्पेक्ट आएगा और वो उसकी कीमत भी चुकाने को तैयार होगा अच्छे से। तो और कहीं ना कहीं वो किसान से डायरेक्टली जुड़ने की कोशिश करेगा, जिससे कि किसान को अच्छे दाम मिलेंगे उसके प्रोड्यूस के लिए। तो ओवरऑल ये जो मैंने जो परिवर्तन देखा है पिछले 5 सालों में दिल्ली में, जो यहाँ के लोग हैं जो खुद से उगाने लगे हैं, वो अब और किसानों से जुड़ के और उनसे सामान खरीद रहे हैं और उनसे चीजें, क्योंकि उनको भी पता है कि हर चीज उनके घर में नहीं उग सकती। तो इससे कहीं ना कहीं फायदा किसान का भी हो रहा है और कंज्यूमर का भी हो रहा है।
Then we move on to the next question from Srinivas Lagu, and I think Mansa can answer this question: how to test quality of compost mainly from garden waste? Mansa?
Quality of compost from garden
Yes.
waste.
Can it be tested somewhere, the quality of compost?
You can send it to labs, but the quality of compost, if you have used wet waste from the kitchen, I think quality of compost would be great. You need not check it, I mean.
Okay. Then we have a question from Sophie Brogger. She writes, yeah, somebody has to say something. So I'm reading the question from Sophie Brogger. Apart from the shade nets, I was thinking more in terms of retaining moisture and managing the water in the monsoon season to avoid surface runoff and increased infiltration. I have worked a lot with permaculture, but have wondered how you deal with these extremes when designing the beds. Can some panelists take this question? How you deal with these extremes when designing the beds?
I guess Masanji, Kapil has already answered a part of that question, and he has just sent a response to his answer. We can move ahead to other questions. And if there are specific questions on specific presentations, we should take those first, because there are a lot of general questions here, as I can see. If you can just take the specific questions to a specific panelist.
This is one question from Rajendra Vise again, and he asks the urban farming की economic feasibility क्या है और उसे कैसे देखना चाहिए? I think it is a good question and that should be addressed.
I can go first. मैं कोशिश करूं इसके जवाब की.
कपिल?
हाँ जी.
जी.
तो अर्बन फार्मिंग की फिजिबिलिटी ऐसा है कि इसमें इसका कॉस्ट जो है शुरुआत में काफी हो सकता है अगर आप छतों पे या बालकनी पे उगा रहे हैं. अगर जमीन पे उगा रहे हैं तो इसकी लागत बहुत कम है. कुछ महीनों में ही लेस देन 3 to 6 months में जो आपकी लागत लग रही है उसके अंदर, वो आपको आराम से उसके अंदर से जो सब्जियां मिल रही है उसकी कीमत से आराम से मिल जाएगी. अगर आप छतों पे उगा रहे हैं तो हमने जो देखा है, जो टेरेस गार्डन में से अगर हम उसकी सब्जी का मूल्यांकन करें तो जो उसमें खर्चा लगा है गार्डन को शुरू करने में और उसको मैनेज करने में, तो लगभग 2 से 3 साल लगते हैं, जहां पर उसका जो इनिशियल इन्वेस्टमेंट है वो वापस रिसीव हो जाता है. और लेकिन इन गार्डन्स की लाइफ बहुत लंबी होती है, तो कहीं ना कहीं आगे जाके 2-3 साल बाद इसमें से कुछ फायदा भी होता है, जहाँ पे एक फैमिली का खर्चा कम भी होता है और कई हद तक अपनी घर की जो सब्जियों की जो खर्चा है वो इससे हम पूरा कर सकते हैं. तो अगर छतों पे उगा रहे हैं तो 2 से 3 साल, अगर जमीन पे उगा रहे हैं तो 3 से 6 महीने में आप इसके खर्चे का रिकवरी कर सकते हैं.
अगला क्वेश्चन है भावना पाठक का. व्हाट आर द मेन क्रॉप्स वन कैन ग्रो ऑन रूफटॉप और बालकनी? ये कपिल बोलेंगे या
मैंने सवाल मिस कर दिया, फिर से रिपीट करेंगे.
व्हाट आर द मेन क्रॉप वन कैन ग्रो ऑन रूफटॉप और बालकनी?
मैंने इसका रिप्लाई किया है चैट में. हमारा एक प्लांटिंग कैलेंडर है दिल्ली के लिए और उसको काफी हद तक इंडिया के मोस्ट प्लेन्स में यूज कर सकते हैं. तो वो अगर आप हमको एक मैसेज करेंगे हमारे ईमेल पे, तो हम आपको उसका जो पीडीएफ फाइल है, मंथ वाइज कैलेंडर है, आप किस महीने में क्या उगा सकते हैं, उसका पूरा कैलेंडर है पूरे साल का.
एक क्वेश्चन है जो मुझे लगता है कि शायद मनसा के लिए है. दिस इज फ्रॉम राम बाबू पंथंगी. Hydroponic method of growing food is not organic in nature. Some traditional organic farmers in US recently contested in court of law when we are using chemical nutrients in hydroponics. How can we treat hydroponics as organic?
Yes, I don't recommend hydroponics, especially when it's grown in a large scale. There might be addition of chemical nutrients for plants to grow because there's no fish culture. Also, at least in aquaponics, the plants use fish excreta to grow. So hydroponics may not be although it's very attractive, I have already stated, but yeah, it has its own challenges, Ram.
So we end with the question answer session, and मैं सभी पैनलिस्ट का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहता हूं और सभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स का भी. And with this, I hand over to Nishant.
Thank you all the panelists and Basantji for a wonderful discussion. We sort of overshoot the time, but I think now we are going to wind up. Just a small request, which we had also requested all the participants yesterday. Because of COVID, a lot of people in Delhi who we work with in community are facing very difficult scenario. And we are doing mutual aid work with them for them. There is this detail which I can share with all of you. If you would like, you can ask for more details on the work that we are doing, and please donate generously to the work. Tomorrow we would be joined for a discussion on urbanization and its relation with urban agriculture. Anubhav Pradhan, who teaches urban literature at South Asian University, and Vishal Shaukin, who runs an urban farm in Palla village in Delhi, will be our panelists. And this session will be moderated by Madhuresh Kumar, who is an activist and researcher and has been with National Alliance of People's Movement for more than a decade. And please do join us the same time, 3 p.m. Also, we would like to just thank all of the participants again. It is an overwhelming experience because we hadn't imagined this kind of participation from different corners. And we started this webinar from a very beginner perspective, and we wanted to showcase what a community research group which is interested in urban agriculture has learned and unlearned about the urban farming and its relation with cities. And now we are very keen to learn further from other speakers and from other participants. And I think the primary expectation of this webinar was to bring these perspectives, these experiences, which are as many and as diverse as possible. And so thanks again for bringing all that, and we would love to discuss more. Please join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. Bye-bye.